I remember my ex-husband when we talked and kind of like came to terms with being divorced. And he said it was infidelity. And he said, Sherri, I was in a place where I could hear what he said. He said, I was in so much pain because we were pregnant and had lost Jeffrey's sister. It was twins, and we had lost his sister and thought we were going to lose Jeffrey. And he said, everybody rallied around you. They want to know how you were doing and what's going on.
And that's important. You're pregnant.
I'm pregnant. But a man goes through, now you're realizing, men, you may not be carrying that baby, but you're no less close to that being that you helped create. Yeah. And he said, everybody rallied around you and was there and they want to pray with you. And it was all about you. And he said, nobody rallied around me. Yeah. And I had nobody to talk to about the pain.
What's up, people? That's real talk. I'm not particularly a fan of Sherri Shepherd, but when I caught this clip, I had to comment on it. She's right. And I've gone through this myself. I mean, my wife and I, we lost 3 altogether, right? 3 pregnancies. And it's rough because she's absolutely right. Most people, if they said anything, they said something to her, not really to me. And I think for the most part, that's because most people didn't know how to exactly empathize. And that's what we're going to talk about for a moment. The problem is people don't know how to empathize for men, most particularly black men. And that includes black men themselves. We don't know how to do it. So people just leave you alone. And if you don't say anything, they leave you alone. And if you break, and whether that's deleting yourself or hurting somebody else, then they blame you, they dismiss you. But we don't know how to empathize. And then you get people like professional counselors and therapists, or some women that will just make comments about how inept men are because they don't know how to empathize with one another. And they offer women's methods for doing so as a solution. And I can tell you that doesn't work either. You end up having men that try to emulate what they've seen women do as a way to express and release pain and heal and so on and so forth. And it turns a lot of other men off. And I think there's a valid reason for that, for the most part. And it's not toxic masculinity. This is just a throwaway term to dismiss men. The reality is, if you want to understand how men navigate pain, especially as men, as a group, it'd be better to pay attention to what they do rather than to just dismiss how they don't mimic women, right? I've observed and experienced about 4 different ways that men, as a collective, navigate and negotiate pain, especially after tragedy. And many of these I experienced myself. So I talk about the 4 ways. I'm not saying it's limited to that. These are just 4 I've observed. It's what I call presence. There's activity. There's endurance or combat. And then lastly, service for you or others. Now, by presence, I give you a quick example. And I've talked about this before. When my wife passed, my boy Mark, he was coming home, driving home from a liquor store. And I let him know. I think I texted him. I was in a daze right after she passed. It was late in the afternoon. And he was walking into his house when I told him. Now, he lives about 3.5 hours from me. So I told him what happened. He was about to put the key in the door. He turned around, got in the car, and drove straight to me. That was it. Just drove straight to me. Didn't even stop for gas. Just jumped in the car. He didn't speed or anything. He just turned around, jumped in the car, drove straight to me. Drove straight to Fresno. And he stayed with me for a couple weeks. And much of that time, we didn't even speak. He was just present. I mean, the man... He cleaned out my garage. I didn't even know what he was doing. Like if I fell asleep or something, he would just go find stuff to do. But the brother was helping. But whenever I was awake, he would just sit with me. And sometimes we wouldn't even speak. You know what I mean? But that had a lot to do with my healing. And, because of that, I think I mentioned it a little earlier, a few months ago, his father recently passed away. I did the same thing. I jumped in the car. I went down to where he was and I just hung with him. You know what I mean? Presence is one way that brothers navigate pain. The other one is activity. And this could be as simple as, sitting over a beer, or it could be going on an adventure or a trip. It's not unlike the hero's journey, but it's an experience that, bonds you, that molds you and that takes your mind off just the pain and helps you focus on the healing and the lessons learned from it. So this is another way I've seen men come together over an activity, something we go do, an adventure we go have, so that we can actually pull out of our pain and actually, see what's going on around us. The third way, I call it endurance or combat. And this is bonding through, some kind of crucible, some kind of fire you go through. Some guys go pick fights at bars. Some guys, sometimes it's a righteous battle. Sometimes it's even activism. But conflict, in a way, can be a way of releasing. And it doesn't always have to be violent or, dangerous, but some type of conflict. And the deepest conflict really is when somebody helps you face a fear that you have difficulty managing. This is when you go from outside external conflict to internal conflict, and having a boy walk with you, having one of your boys walk with you through something that, you both know you fear. And he just stands with you as a support measure. There's a way to go about doing that. Sometimes it could be attending an event, going to a funeral, going to a wedding, depending on the circumstances. But, when your boy comes to support you going through something that you both know you fear, that's another form of conflict that brothers will bond over. And I've just observed that, and I've been through that. The last way, I call it service for you or for others. There's a brother I've had on my show a few times. His name's Jelaba. And again, when my wife passed, I don't know what happened. My phone bill my phone was cut off. And to be honest, some of that period is a blur, because again, I think I was in shock, but I don't remember why. But all I know is he hooked up a phone line so people could reach me, so I could reach others. He just did it. That was it. He just did it. He contacted, I think he called my mother and told me, here's the number. Use this till your phone's back up. I didn't ask him for it. He didn't ask if he should do it. He just did it. It was a form of service. It was something I needed, but I wasn't even aware of. And he just was there right then and there for me. And I love that brother to this day, man. But again, it's a form of service. Now there's another way. You can also perform service for others. You as an individual, or you and other men, can come together to provide a service, whether it's helping the homeless, serving food, delivering, goods to good. It doesn't matter what it is, but putting yourself into service. Sometimes people do this through their church or whatever. That takes your mind off of your own pain. And sometimes doing it with other brothers is a way of bonding as well. See, these are just 4, and I'm sure we could talk about others, and I hope you guys will by adding to the comment section. But there are many ways that black men navigate pain, that men navigate pain that's dismissed and just falsely compared to, this kind of stereotypical narrative of how women do, and that's the only measure for navigating pain. That's the only measure for, having some sense of empathy. And I would argue, let's just pay closer attention to what men already do, and then begin to reflect on what it means beyond that. So anyway, just wanted to share that. But yeah, Sherri Shepherd's right. There's a lot of pain that I went through, and something very similar, losing. As a matter of fact, my third child was my daughter. She would be 23 right now. She died in the womb, and my wife had to give birth to her, even though she had already passed. And I was the first to hold her. You talking about trauma, you know what I mean? But nobody said a word. So this brother, apparently her ex-husband had an affair. Others shut down, others go into John Henryism and just start working. There's a lot of different ways we attempt to navigate pain. Some of it is toxic. Some of it is painful to ourselves, detrimental to ourselves, and some of it can be uplifting. But we just tell these stories about men and we leave no nuance to it, and it bothers me. So anyway, please feel free to drop your comments, in the comment section. Tell me what you've observed, what you've experienced, what you suggest we focus on when it comes to men, empathy, navigating pain. Give us your thoughts. All right, man. Peace.